and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us. I'm going to get started straight away by introducing you to our two fantastic panelists who are going to be joining me for the next half an hour or so. After 15 or more years in Silicon Valley, including an executive role at Amazon, Atif Rafiq became the first CDO in the Fortune 500 when he joined McDonald's. He's been at the centre of driving business transformation 3 times since then, with senior roles at other companies including Volvo and MGM Resorts. Martina Buchhauser is another alumni of Volvo. She's the former CPO Volvo Cars, and she's also held various executive positions in global procurement at BMW, MAN Trucks and General Motors. She's non-executive director of various advisory boards and a pioneer of anchoring sustainability in the supply chain. Atif and Martina, welcome. Atif, I'd like to start by asking you coined the phrase corporate biohacking. How did you come up with it and why?
Well, I know the term is a little bit of a mouthful, but it's a very personal one for me because it stems from my journey moving from Amazon to what I call incumbent companies, very well-known companies that have been around a lot longer and were born in a different age, and I'm now looking to compete with the Amazons of the world. So what is corporate biohacking? To me, it's really about helping a company at any starting point, wherever it is at the moment, and moving it systematically towards more agility. It's the idea that while we're inspired by the agility of companies like Amazon, we cannot turn our organizations into Amazon overnight, and our companies have different histories to begin with. And yet agility is this very huge ambition to solve for, and so how do we do it in a way that's natural for organizations when agility is really what defines your ability to compete in the marketplace?
We're going to talk a lot more about biohacking and indeed about Amazon as well. But Martina, I want to throw to you. Let's talk a bit about how business agility lends itself to procurement.
Yes, and I think the time is really right to talk about this. If we see we're still, in this pandemic, we've seen a lot of things happening. The whole supply chain was not resilient, but I would like to frame it a bit more for the procurement world. Because if you think about that, procurement in many companies means that they're taking care of about 70-80% of the value chain. That makes a big impact on your bottom line from a cost perspective, of course, but it also makes a big impact on your top line, on your revenue, if namely you are not able to bring the parts in, the components in, the systems in, the services that you need to make your product. And then if you even think about that, there's this huge supply chain. And now everyone is talking about sustainability and how do we make a positive environmental and a positive social impact. Then also this is something with this 70% coming from external sources that procurement needs to take care of. And I would say this is a huge responsibility. This cannot be done if we continue working in the way we have worked in the past.
I guess the words agility and supply chain will make a lot of people shudder, won't they? They don't sound like natural bedfellows, as it were. How easy is it to orchestrate that change? You're dealing with possibly thousands of suppliers in hundreds of different places around the world. How do you instill that culture?
Yeah, that's exactly the question. And I would like to look at it from a more of a role modeling perspective. I think that plays a big role because I also feel that in many companies, and you can confirm this or not, but in many companies, there's still quite a bit of silo thinking going on. And if you think about why do people think in silos? Well, they might be afraid of making mistakes and then being blamed for something happening. So I think this silo thinking even prevents people from daring to do the right thing, daring to try new things. So I give you an example. I had a supplier close to a very big plant of ours. And for the last 3 launches with that supplier, it failed. They never managed to have a successful launch. So a small group, within my team, we said we're going to change this now. And it was massive resistance, even in the top leadership of the company, because they all feared that something would go wrong, and therefore had always accepted that supplier just screws up, and we're going to do the same task force thing again. But we actually made supplier B take over the whole plant from supplier A. And still, with a lot of transparency, with a lot of dialogue, with a lot of talking about it, we managed to never drop the ball at all, and finally ended up, being in good terms with both of these suppliers. But that's the kind of role modeling I'm talking about.
I think that's a really interesting point that you make, that the reluctance was, we know that this particular supplier isn't very good, but we want to stick with them because at least we know who they are. Atif, is that something that you have seen in your experience as well? It's like sort of the better the devil you know.
Well, I can't comment from a procurement standpoint, but what I can talk about is old ways of working, or ways of working that are no longer fit for purpose. And this is really the work of change and transformation. And I would say that every large cap company on the globe is actually in the midst of this change journey. Now, for example, companies like Amazon happen to do those things very well.
A lot of people who either work or have worked at Amazon say the same thing, that it's a surprisingly agile company, and it has managed to keep that ethos, hasn't it, despite enormous amounts of growth. Tell us the secret. How do they do it?
Well, the secret sauce of Amazon is really the culture. I mean, the fact that Jeff Bezos has scaled the management culture is really extraordinary. It's the biggest invention that they've come up with. It's bigger than the Kindle or the idea of getting your groceries in 24 hours. The things they do for customers are really a function of this culture and this management system by which every team works, and they've been able to scale it. So that's very, very powerful. You really don't want to get in front of Jeff B, when he was full-time at the company, without having the detective work, because the expectation, the bar is quite high around that. Now, to do this, you have to be in a constant mode of learning. Learning is not a singular event where you go out and plug some gaps in the knowledge of to move a project along. It's a constant activity. So it's a big part of any job, and it's a big part of their culture. And that's really, I think, in my view, one of the key ingredients in their secret sauce.
Martina, that talks, doesn't it, to what you were saying before? Atif is mentioning detective work and learning. And I think that ties quite neatly in with failure. You are going to learn that some of the things you were planning to do are not going to work. But I think that it's easy to say we don't mind if people fail, but it's quite hard to genuinely instill that, isn't it? How do you do that?
Yeah, it really is, and I would like to piggyback a bit on what Atif said. Is we need teams to enable teams to take decisions. I mean, yes, mistakes are being made, and it's not that you cannot change this again, right? I mean, what can really happen? I think you have to be a bit sensitive with, well, I mean, it's not the whole world falling down if a decision is taken that needs to be adjusted, which it needs to be anyway. So I think you have to be a bit open, a bit more flexible, and this is what we're trying to instill with actually global teams, and building structures that this team is empowered and can work together and run the show.
Well, I think Martina's spot on. I mean, one of the hacks at Amazon is this idea of one-way doors and two-way doors. So one-way door is something which is, you can't walk back through. But when you have a decision which is a two-way door, the risk is a lot lower. And so that's an opportunity to give autonomy to the team and develop their instinct around whatever the matter is. So a small hack there that is very common at Amazon. Just to make it a little bit personal, for me, I had to get my organizations comfortable that they're not presenting perfect finished plans and answers when they meet with me. And my job is neither to tell people what to do, nor to simply bless their plans as perfect. It's something in the middle.
But you already have to have a good culture in place. I mean, I was thinking, that's the easy option, isn't it? That's sort of what you want your leaders to do, tell you what to do, or tell you that you're doing it right. That's the easy path of management, isn't it?
Yes, but I think you can also, you're being so much rewarded if the team realizes that they can actually run the show. So if the team knows that, I think they get so much more enthusiastic to run their show, without running it on their own, but building into and contributing to this bigger picture of what needs to be achieved in the company.
I would add it's deeply rewarding for everybody. It is a barrier that needs to be overcome because you're talking about years and years of what I call learned helplessness, which is essentially tell me what to do. That's the easiest path for everybody. Then I don't have to think. I can't be blamed. This does not produce great outcomes. But, once you overcome this barrier, it really unleashes tremendous intellectual capital.
You both have a fantastic collective experience, in your own careers of managing this sort of transformation and this change and leading it. How easy is it for you to take what you've learned from one firm to another, or do you sort of feel like you're starting again every time you rock up somewhere else? Are there any transferable lessons?
To be honest with you, I think there's more in common than different as you move from industry to industry. So, for example, people might say, what do cars have to do with resorts and what do burgers have to do with cars? Those are my last three moves. And I say, well, actually I have a head start because I've seen this journey before. I've seen situations where the playbook has worked so well, the company has become number one in the category and has been around for 60 years, in Volvo's case over 90 years. So there is success there. But the playbook is stale and the world has changed. And to get more agile, we need to change how the collaboration works inside the company.
I feel like we need to talk about the last 18 months, don't we? We've seen so much change since the start of the coronavirus pandemic, much of it forced upon pretty much every business on the planet, really. And also we've seen dramatic changes in consumer behaviour. There's a lot of discussion now about how permanent these changes might be. I'm interested in your thoughts on, what we'll take with us and what we should maybe leave behind. Atif?
Sure. Well, I think there's a ton of change that we're just really at the very start when it comes to the workplace. Can you imagine saying this statement 2 years ago? Every single meeting happening in every company is a digital meeting. That was an unheard of concept. You know exactly who contributed, how they contributed, whether they were effective or not. I mean, the amount of insight you can have based on that and the kinds of things you can do with that are really powerful.
It's like that meme, could this meeting have been an email, has taken on a whole new life, hasn't it?
100%. I mean, I like to think about digital workflows. I think digital workflows are the future of companies. I think we need to go beyond that. I mean, the idea of hybrid work and remote work really speaks to the idea that of flexibility, right? It does not have to be what it's been in the past, which is show up every day in an office, being locked up in a series and sequence of meetings with 7 or 8 other people. There are other ways to get the intellectual capital, to get the collaboration and the right strategies out there.
It seems to me as an observer, though, that leaders and workers are going in two different directions here. The workers are saying we want hybrid working, we want to work from home, we don't want to be coming to the office every day. Leaders are saying, well, you have an office, we're paying for this office, we've bought it or rented it or whatever, we want you in it. Martina, is that something that you've seen as well?
Yes, I have seen that. And I really don't understand why people still think that, oh, now they've built these buildings and now they want everyone in the office because then they see, what people do. I would say that if someone doesn't do the job, they don't wait for home office not to do their job, right? Because they would do the same in the office. And I think this is where people need to start giving feedback, start really being open and honest with things that are not working well, so that people can actually adjust and have a chance to adjust instead of thinking, everyone needs to be in the office and then I can see how they work and whether they work and how they behave. That is completely wrong.
And the car industry, of course, has had the added challenge of the global chip shortage on top of everything else, at least, as if you didn't have enough to deal with.
Oh, absolutely. And there you see, I mean, the pandemic has also brought out again or magnified a bit that huge issue of, how you have to have a resilient supply base. And that's something I think all the companies are going to continue working with.
Atif, I don't just want to pick on the car sector here. Obviously, the hospitality entertainment industry has also been hit extremely hard. What are the lessons, the enduring lessons, perhaps, do you think, learned by MGM Resorts?
Well, I think that every crisis is an opportunity to rise to the occasion. And at MGM Resorts, you had that situation. I mean, just by way of context, the resorts were closed for 2 months and then reopened at the very start of the pandemic. When they closed, the company, like many resorts company, was a little bit behind when it comes to modern digital experiences like a mobile check-in, going straight to your room, picking your room from your phone, avoiding lines, that kind of thing. All things you expect in 2021. But we had some great people in the organization who actually allowed us to reopen resorts with mobile check-in. And on the very first day, we had 35% adoption, and that's sustained. So that was very powerful. And so the lesson here is really this sort of march of trying to meet customer expectations and really keep that evolving and never resting that you have something that's good enough. That is sort of the key takeaway for a lot of companies.
I want to touch briefly on quality control. I mean, to turn something around like that in 2 months prior to the pandemic would probably have been a bit of a big ask, wouldn't it? You'd have had a lot of development time, a lot of focus groups, a lot of tweaking. I imagine a project like that could have taken months and months before it was deemed ready for the customer experience, if you like. And suddenly you've got people beating your door down saying, we just want to come back, please let us in, we don't care. But that's not going to last, is it? That sort of goodwill. Do you think that the pace of change is going to have to slow down a bit as people start to reflect more on the quality of the experience rather than, thank goodness we can do something?
Well, I think, this was a wonderful example because, up until the very end, let me say 48 hours before we were welcoming customers back, there were things that were not working, right? The idea is just keep going. If you can get 98% of customers happy and then take care of the rest 2% and make them whole and give them some more hospitality because of the inconvenience, and then make sure that problem is a non-issue after a week, that's a no-brainer to move forward with. But that's really more indicative of the world we live in and the nature of innovation.
We've talked a lot about stuff that's worked and stuff that you should do. I wonder if we could focus a little bit on pitfalls. What are the biggest pitfalls that one should try to avoid? Martina?
Yeah, and that has always happened, is always happening. I think you have to be really disciplined to stick to your plan to your strategy of what is it we need to change. How can we become better? How do we instill this business agility? And all the great things you set up there, stick to it. Don't let that fall down again and fall through the cracks because there's a crisis coming. Because you really want to work on all these other things that will avoid crises to be as bad as we have now seen in the pandemic or in other cases. So really stick to your plan. Don't give up on what do you need to put in place, what structure do you need to put in place globally to make this happen, even if, some crisis is coming up again. Then divide the people, there are the experts that are so good at firefighting. But these people, they're really not good at establishing new things, looking forward, strategies. They're really good at firefighting. So let them do the firefighting, but make sure you nurture the right competencies in the rest of the team, And that would be to be more curious, to be more challenging partner to the stakeholders. It would be to build relationships successfully with the suppliers. So those are new competencies, I think, that we also need to make sure that we bring into or nurture more in the procurement world?
Well, I think a different way to say the same thing is that the new must be the master of the old. And I hate to be so black and white about it, and it's really not a black and white thing. But if you know what good looks like, and Martina talked a good deal about what this means in procurement, is working collectively with your suppliers, breaking down barriers internally and working cross-functionally, being curious. I mean, those are all the right ingredients of what will get you to the right answer on whatever you're working on, whatever project or initiative. And you cannot have these type of change catalysts or people who get it or slow down by moving upstream, swimming upstream constantly. It's just not going to work. It's going to exhaust them, and you'll only get a fractional outcome of that, if any. And so you have to design the organization where, let me just say, you put people in a position where they're able to lead and able to, once they know what good looks like, and they're able to upskill the rest of the organization to that. And that's not to create different sort of factions or lesser haves in the organization, but it is really to send a message that this is where we're going, and everybody's going to be swimming in that direction. I think this is very critical. Companies who do that, they get the result faster and a whole lot better.
So don't always swim upstream, as it were. You are both really inspiring leaders to listen to, and I'm sure that people watching are going to want to take something away that they can start doing now. What can you start doing now to make your business more agile? Now, we're not all Amazons, Volvos of this world. You might be working in a far smaller organization, but what is one thing that you could do right now to start making this change and make your business more agile? Martina.
Well, I think you should role model what you want your organization to focus on, and how you want your organization to work with others. I think that kind of role modeling is very important.
I believe you can change a company one meeting at a time. As ludicrous as that sounds, you don't need a big transformation program. You don't need consultants. You don't need 10 years. You can do it one meeting at a time. One meeting can change a company. How you run the meeting, how you promote the dialogue, create the curiosity, promote collective thinking, shared understanding, all those things, they can happen. What will help you get there is standing up methods like a learning plan. A learning plan, again, is just a way to tackle the unknowns and the hard parts and just sort of jot them down and decide to get smarter about them as a group. And if you begin to work through that learning plan and look at the rate of learning as a sign of progress, just as much as any execution step, you'll begin to see you'll begin to see that cascade into the project velocity and the outcomes and the understanding. You'll get real momentum in the thing you're working on in your organization.
And I would also add that leaders need to step up, and leaders need to make sure that they empower their teams, that together with the team they embrace the change, that leaders coach their teams, guide their teams, give good feedback, and create that safe space where people can dare to make a difference, can learn every day and can thrive for a really, really good personal and professional development.
I could talk to you both all day, but I'm afraid that's all we've got time for. It just remains for me to thank you both very much, Martina Buchhauser and Atif Rafiq, and thank you for watching. I hope you got a lot out of this, lots of food for thought. Let us know how you get on with your own business agility.